My name is Mel Kenny. I'm a member of the South Berwick VFW Post 5744. And I have with me today Ken Goodwin. Ken is a World War II member of our post. And today Ken is going to show you and tell you the story about the surrender of the war in the Philippines in 1945. Kenny?
I was with the 40th Infantry Division on Panay Island the day that Japan surrendered, August 16, 1945. We had been taken for special training for the invasion of Japan, and we was all ready to leave for the invasion of Japan. Our division was supposed to land on Kyushu Island in the Japanese chain of islands. But the war ended as we was getting ready to leave. The 40th Infantry Division was told that we wouldn't be going to Japan for occupation, that we would have to stay on Panay Island and try to get what was estimated to be 3,000 Japanese troops that were still in the mountains and didn't know the war was over. It took us 2 weeks. We first went up with trucks with loudspeakers and called out for them to come down, but nobody came down. And finally, they flew over the mountains with Piper Cubs and dropped leaflets saying the same thing, that the war was over and they should come down and surrender at the airstrip by the river. About 2 weeks after Japan surrendered, there was 25 Japanese troops came out on the airstrip. Our commander went out and talked with them, and the Japanese officer that was in charge of them said that the rest of his men was up in the mountains, and our commander told him to take 6 of his men, go back up in the mountains, and try to get the rest of them to come down and surrender and bring all of their weapons. So he sent 6 of his healthiest men back up in the mountains. It was 17 miles from where they were at the airstrip back up in the mountains. And they went back up in the mountains, and they finally persuaded the rest of the Japanese to come down and surrender. And the last day of August, there was 1,754 Japanese troops came down and surrendered. Probably a third of them had been wounded, and some were carried on the backs of the healthiest. Some of them were walking with crutches made out of tree limbs that had a crotch, and they used them as crutches. Some of them were wounded so bad they were on stretchers. I was standing by one of the ambulances that was going to take the wounded to the hospital, and 2 Japanese corpsmen came up with a wounded Japanese soldier on a homemade stretcher. And I guess they thought that I was a medic where I was standing by the ambulance, and they put him down right by about 2 feet in front of me on the ground. And he laid there on the stretcher looking at my canteen, and finally he put his fingers up to his mouth and then pointed to my canteen. Well, my buddy that was standing beside of me could talk Japanese. He was born and raised in California. And I said, I think that soldier wants a drink of water. You think I ought to give him a drink? And he says, I wouldn't give him a drink after what they did to us. And I said, yeah, but you know, the war is over now, and that could be you or I on that stretcher instead of him. I'm going to give him a drink of water. So I gave him my rifle to hold, and I took my canteen out, and I knelt down beside the wounded Japanese soldier, and I lifted his head up off the stretcher. I gave him 3 or 4 swallows of water and put his head back down on the stretcher, and he said something in Japanese, and I didn't know what he said. And about that time, 2 of our medics came, picked up the stretcher and was going to put him in the ambulance. And when they picked him up, he put his hand inside of his shirt and he pulled out this flag and put it in my hand. They put him in the ambulance and took him to the hospital, and I never saw the prisoner again. But I said to my buddy, I said, do you know what that Japanese soldier said to me when I gave him the drink of water? And he said, yes. He said, you're my friend now. And I never got his name. I don't know whether he made it back to Japan. But I go to the schools and speak to the children at the schools, at the Marshwood Middle School, and I've been to colleges, and I've taught several times at these schools, and I tell them my story about what I done, and I often wonder if that Japanese soldier that I gave the drink to is telling the Japanese children in Japan what the 18-year-old American soldier did for him when he was on the stretcher on Panay Island near death.
Kenny, that's a great story. It is out of the history books. Kenny is the only one left that's signature is on this flag. The rest have passed on. That was his squad. Their names were signed on that flag. So, Kenny, thanks for telling your story to us. All right.
Thank you.